On the 4th of July, a day steeped in the tradition of American independence and national pride, a dramatic scene unfolded over the nation's capital. The familiar calm of a summer holiday was punctuated by the thunderous roar of advanced military aircraft, including F-35 fighter jets and formidable B-2 bombers, as they streaked across the sky above the White House. This powerful display of military might serve as a backdrop for a pivotal political moment. Inside the executive mansion, President Donald Trump, with characteristic fanfare, put his signature on a piece of legislation he had championed relentlessly. This was the Big and Beautiful Act, a name coined by his own Republican Party, intended to evoke a sense of grandeur and prosperity. The act's signing on this symbolic date was no coincidence. It was a carefully orchestrated event designed to project strength and signal a new chapter in American economic policy, one that would ripple through every sector of society. The journey of the Big and Beautiful Act to the president's desk was anything but smooth, reflecting the deep and often bitter political chasms that define contemporary America. The bill, a sprawling document of 940 pages, had navigated a perilous path through the United States Congress. In May, it had barely cleared the House of Representatives, only to face a more intense battleground in the Senate. The upper chamber witnessed a legislative drama complete with marathon debates, procedural maneuvers, and even defections within the Republican ranks. The vote was so precariously balanced that it ultimately resulted in a 50-50 tie, a deadlock that necessitated the rare intervention of Vice President Mike Pence, who cast the deciding vote to ensure its passage. This razor-thin victory underscored the profound ideological divide, with votes falling almost perfectly along party lines, a testament to the polarized state of American politics. At its core, the Big and Beautiful Act represents a continuation and significant expansion of the economic philosophy that characterized Trump's first term in office. It is essentially an upgraded version of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, a landmark piece of legislation from his initial presidency that was set to expire. The new act aims to make many of those tax cuts permanent, particularly for corporations, while introducing a host of new measures. It proposes a massive fiscal restructuring over the next decade, with plans to cut taxes by a staggering $4 trillion and simultaneously slash government spending by at least $1.5 trillion. The legislation is not merely about numbers, it is a statement of priorities, fundamentally reshaping where the nation's vast resources will be directed and whose fortunes will be favored in the years to come. The fierce debate surrounding the act stems from its profound implications for different segments of the American population and the economy at large. The bill is a complex tapestry of fiscal policy that promises to create clear winners and losers. It reallocates federal funds by boosting spending in areas like border security, national defense, and traditional energy production. Conversely, it makes deep cuts to programs strongly championed by the Democratic Party, including healthcare subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, welfare programs such as food stamps, and incentives for green energy initiatives. This stark contrast in policy direction highlights the fundamental disagreements between the two major parties over the role of government and the best path toward national prosperity, setting the stage for a contentious new era in American economic and social life. While the Big and Beautiful Act was presented to the American public as a masterstroke designed to make America great again, a chorus of dissenting voices, both at home and abroad, began to argue that its long-term consequences might achieve the very opposite. Critics pointed out that the bill, in its aggressive pursuit of a particular economic vision, could inadvertently create significant strategic vulnerabilities for the United States. The central irony, as many observers noted, is that the nation poised to gain the most from this quintessentially American legislation might not be America itself, but its chief global competitor, China. This startling perspective reframes the entire debate, suggesting that the act's true legacy may not be one of renewed American dominance, but of an accelerated shift in global power towards the East. The sound of celebration, some quipped, might be loudest not in Washington, but in Beijing. The connection between this American domestic policy and China's strategic ascent lies primarily in the future of energy and technology. In an era where the demand for electricity is set to explode, driven by the voracious energy needs of artificial intelligence and data centers, the Big and Beautiful Act makes a bold and controversial bet. It deliberately rolls back support for the burgeoning renewable energy sector in the United States, phasing out crucial tax credits for utility-scale solar and wind power, as well as for electric vehicles. This move is a direct contrast to the path being forged by China, which has been aggressively investing in and dominating the global supply chains for these very technologies. By hobbling its own clean energy industries, the United States risks ceding the future of energy innovation, and by extension, a critical component of economic and military strength directly to its main rival. This potential strategic self-sabotage has not gone unnoticed by prominent figures within the American technology and innovation sectors. Elon Musk, a titan of industry whose companies are at the forefront of electric vehicles, battery storage, and reusable rockets, has been one of the most vocal critics, labeling the bill's energy policies as fundamentally misguided and destructive. His warnings highlight a critical link that the legislation seems to ignore. A nation's ability to generate vast amounts of cheap, clean electricity is now inextricably tied to its capacity to lead in the artificial intelligence revolution. AI is not just a software challenge, it is an energy challenge. The country that can power the AI engines of tomorrow most efficiently and affordably will hold an immense advantage, shaping everything from medical breakthroughs to national security. Ultimately, the passage of the Big and Beautiful Act raises a monumental question. Will this act of American political will truly fortify the nation's future, or will it be remembered as a historic miscalculation that cleared the path for China's rise? The legislation, born from a desire to unleash American economic power, may have the unintended consequence of shackling it to the energy sources of the past, while China races ahead to command the industries of the future. As the New York Times columnist Thomas L. Friedman noted, the situation has led some to ironically echo the sentiment of Chinese netizens who refer to Trump as Comrade Chuan Jiangguo, a nickname implying he is unwittingly helping to build up China. The story of this act is therefore not just an American story, it is a global one, with profound implications for the world order in the 21st century. At its very foundation, the Big and Beautiful Act is not a creation born from a vacuum, but rather a deliberate and powerful extension of a pre-existing economic doctrine. It serves as the direct successor and substantial upgrade to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which was the signature legislative achievement of President Trump's first term. That earlier law initiated a dramatic shift in American fiscal policy, most notably by slashing the corporate tax rate from 35% down to 21%. With the 2017 Act's key provisions scheduled to expire at the end of 2024, the new bill was conceived to make this lower tax reality permanent. It takes the core principles of its predecessor and cements them for the foreseeable future, ensuring the economic philosophy of the Trump administration endures. The sheer scale of the Big and Beautiful Act is what earns it the big in its title. The legislation, sprawling across 940 densely packed pages, outlines a fiscal overhaul of monumental proportions intended to unfold over the next 10 years. The headline figures are staggering. The act proposes to cut federal taxes by an estimated $4 trillion, a sum that reverberates through every corner of the economy. In a supposed effort to offset this massive reduction in revenue, the bill also mandates deep cuts in government spending, aiming for a reduction of at least $1.5 trillion over the same decade. This dual-pronged approach represents a fundamental reordering of the federal government's financial priorities, promising to reshape the economic lives of every American citizen for years to come. Beyond the headline tax cuts, the act delves deep into the specifics of corporate finance, embedding incentives designed to spur business investment. It makes the 21% corporate tax rate permanent and enhances tax breaks for capital expenditure. This includes more generous deductions for new machinery and equipment, as well as expanded credits for research and development. The underlying theory is classic supply-side economics, that by freeing up corporate capital from tax obligations, businesses will reinvest those funds into growth, innovation, and job creation. The act is an unwavering commitment to this economic model, betting the nation's future prosperity on its success. However, the bill's scope extends far beyond corporate boardrooms and into the daily lives of specific groups of American workers. The legislation introduces a provision that exempts tips and overtime pay from federal income tax. While presented as a boon for the working class, analysis suggests the impact may be more limited than it appears. Workers who rely on tips constitute only 2.5% of the workforce, and only 12% of hourly workers earn overtime pay annually. This targeted tax relief highlights the bill's strategic nature, aiming to reward specific constituencies while advancing broader ideological goals. The journey of the Big and Beautiful Act from a Republican policy proposal to the law of the land was a testament to the brutal, hyper-partisan nature of modern American politics. Its passage was not a foregone conclusion but the result of a grueling legislative war fought on multiple fronts. The process was a high-wire act of political maneuvering, requiring immense pressure from the White House and staunch discipline within the Republican ranks. Trump set an ambitious and symbolic deadline of July 4th, Independence Day, for the bill to be on his desk for signing. This tight time frame added a layer of urgency to the proceedings, forcing the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader to navigate a treacherous path filled with potential pitfalls, where a single defection or procedural delay could have derailed the entire enterprise and handed the president a significant political defeat. The first major battle was waged in the U.S. House of Representatives, where the bill passed in May, but only by a slim margin that foreshadowed the difficulties to come. The real drama, however, unfolded in the Senate, where the Republican majority was razor-thin. The chamber became a theater of political conflict, featuring marathon speeches intended to run out the clock, last-minute negotiations behind closed doors, and moments of high tension as Republican members threatened to break ranks. The opposition from the Democratic Party was unified and absolute, framing the bill as a giveaway to the wealthy at the expense of the poor and middle class. The legislative process was a white-knuckle affair, with the bill's fate hanging in the balance until the final moments of the vote. Ultimately, the Senate vote resulted in a dramatic 50-50 stalemate, a perfect reflection of the nation's political schism. With the chamber evenly divided, the constitutional power to break the tie fell to the vice president. In a moment laden with historical weight, Vice President Mike Pence cast the deciding 51st vote, pushing the bill over the finish line. This tie-breaking vote was not just a procedural formality, it was a stark symbol of the bill's contentiousness and the extreme lengths to which its proponents had to go to secure its passage. The victory, while celebrated by Republicans as a monumental achievement, was achieved without a single vote from the opposing party, highlighting the deep and seemingly unbridgeable chasm that separated the two sides. Even with the Senate's approval, the legislative odyssey was not yet complete. The version of the bill that passed the Senate contained significant revisions and amendments compared to the one that had cleared the House of Representatives weeks earlier. According to congressional rules, these differences had to be reconciled. The bill was sent back to the House for a final vote on the amended version, putting the Speaker under immense pressure to whip the necessary votes before Trump's July 4th deadline expired. This final step, though often a formality, was fraught with risk, as any changes made in the Senate could have alienated key members in the House. The successful navigation of this final legislative hurdle was the culmination of a relentless and uncompromising political campaign to enact a transformative and deeply polarizing law. The Big and Beautiful Act is more than fiscal policy. It's a bold statement of Republican ideology. By slashing taxes for corporations and the wealthy and cutting social programs, the bill champions supply-side economics and a smaller government. This act draws a sharp line between Republican and Democratic visions: prosperity through tax cuts versus fairness through social investment. The legislation institutionalizes division, creating clear winners: corporations, fossil fuels, the wealthy, and losers, low-income families, healthcare, and the environment. Rather than compromise, the act hardens partisan lines, deepening polarization and making future cooperation even more elusive. The Big and Beautiful Act is both a product and a catalyst of America's ideological divide. The biggest winners: corporations and the wealthy. The act cements a low 21% corporate tax rate, making it permanent and globally competitive, while showering businesses with new tax breaks for investment and R&D. Traditional energy industries benefit as green incentives are rolled back, tilting the market back to oil, gas, and coal. High-income families, especially in high-tax states, see their SALT deduction cap quadruple, slashing their tax bills. These changes overwhelmingly favor the affluent, reinforcing the bill's reputation as a windfall for the rich. Meanwhile, the fossil fuel industry and traditional automakers secure their dominance as clean energy incentives vanish. The Big and Beautiful Act is a triumph for business interests and the wealthy elite. For every winner, there's a loser, and the most vulnerable pay the price. Deep cuts to Medicaid and SNAP mean millions lose health coverage and food assistance, pushing low-income families further into hardship. The Congressional Budget Office projects 12 million will lose insurance while food insecurity rises. The bill's tax cuts far outpace spending reductions, ballooning the national debt by trillions. Future generations inherit this debt, facing higher interest payments and inevitable cuts to education, housing, and research. The act mortgages America's future to fund tax breaks for today's wealthy. The Big and Beautiful Act is a direct threat to the nation's most vulnerable and to its fiscal stability. The healthcare sector faces a double blow. Millions lose coverage, and nearly 500,000 jobs are at risk as demand for services drops. Nurses, technicians, and support staff face layoffs, all as a direct result of prioritizing tax cuts over healthcare investment. A small group, service workers earning tips and overtime, get targeted tax relief, but this does little to offset the broader harm. The act's greatest cost falls on the young trillions in new debt, will crowd out investment in education, infrastructure, and research. Tomorrow's Americans will inherit fewer opportunities and greater financial burdens. The Big and Beautiful Act rewards today's powerful at the expense of future generations. Its legacy, a weaker healthcare system and a nation mortgaged for decades to come. The Big and Beautiful Act is a full retreat from the Green Revolution, gutting tax credits for solar, wind, and electric vehicles. This halts clean energy investment, kills jobs, and hands global leadership in renewables and EVs to China. Even red states like Texas, booming in wind and solar, now see those gains threatened. The bill's token support for nuclear and hydro is hamstrung by red tape and restrictions, especially on battery storage. By abandoning clean tech, the U.S. risks falling behind economically and environmentally. The act's energy policy is driven by ideology, not economics, sacrificing progress for partisan goals. The Big and Beautiful Act cedes America's clean energy future to its competitors. The timing of America's legislative retreat from clean energy could not be more perilous, as it coincides with the dawn of the artificial intelligence era. The connection between energy and national power has never been more direct or more critical. AI models, particularly the large language models that are revolutionizing technology, are incredibly power-hungry. The process of training these models and generating answers consumes vast amounts of electricity, and this demand is projected to grow exponentially. The nation that can provide the cheapest, most abundant, and cleanest electricity to power its AI data centers will hold an insurmountable advantage in developing the technologies that will define the future, from curing diseases to creating unbreakable codes and achieving breakthroughs in national security. This creates a profound paradox at the heart of the Big and Beautiful Act. While the legislation is framed as a strategy to make America strong, its energy policies directly undermine the nation's ability to compete in the most important technological race of our time. The bill's hostility towards solar and wind power removes the fastest and most affordable options for meeting the surging electricity demand from the AI sector. Data centers need power now, not in the 10 years it might take to build a new nuclear or natural gas plant. By making clean electricity more scarce and expensive, the act effectively places a tax on American innovation, slowing down the development of AI and putting U.S. tech companies at a significant disadvantage against their global competitors. This critical linkage is something that China understands with perfect clarity. While the United States is mired in a political debate about the color of its energy, Beijing is pursuing an all-encompassing strategy to dominate the entire clean energy and technology ecosystem. China recognizes that its ability to produce massive amounts of affordable electricity is directly tied to its future economic and military strength. It is not just manufacturing solar panels and wind turbines for export, it is deploying them at a breathtaking scale at home to power its own industries and its rapidly expanding AI capabilities. China is not choosing between the economy of the past and the economy of the future. It is using its dominance in new energy to fuel its ambition for technological supremacy. This is the very point that American innovators like Elon Musk have been trying to make. Musk, whose companies are at the nexus of manufacturing, energy, and technology, sees the destructive logic of the bill with alarming clarity. He has repeatedly warned that providing aid to the industries of the past, while actively harming the industries of the future, is a recipe for national decline. The future of economic strength is not complicated. It will belong to the countries that can generate the most computing power, which in turn depends on generating the most electricity. By crippling its own renewable energy sector, the United States is voluntarily forfeiting this race, handing a decisive advantage to a rival that is more than happy to seize it. A central stated goal of the Trump administration is to achieve American energy dominance on the world stage. However, the policies enshrined in the Big and Beautiful Act make this ambition practically impossible to achieve in the modern era. The very definition of energy dominance has shifted. It is no longer solely about possessing vast reserves of oil and natural gas. In the 21st century, true dominance requires leadership across the entire energy spectrum, especially in the renewable technologies that are growing at the fastest rate globally. By deliberately weakening its solar and wind industries, the United States is choosing to compete with one hand tied behind its back, clinging to a vision of energy power that is rapidly becoming obsolete. The practical challenges of relying solely on fossil fuels and nuclear power to meet future energy needs are immense. Suppose the US decided today to power the next wave of AI data centers using only natural gas. Even with America's abundant gas reserves, the country would need a massive number of new gas-fired turbines. The primary manufacturers of these highly specialized machines, General Electric, Siemens Energy, and Mitsubishi, are already facing a huge backlog of orders from around the world. An American utility placing an order today would be lucky to have a new turbine installed and operational by 2030. This timeline is far too slow to meet the immediate and explosive growth in electricity demand driven by the tech sector. This problem is further complicated by other policies championed by the administration. Under the new tariffs imposed on imported steel and aluminum, the cost of building these massive turbines, as well as the pipelines and infrastructure needed to support them, would skyrocket. This creates a situation where the government is simultaneously promoting fossil fuels, while making the essential components for their use more expensive and harder to procure. In stark contrast, a new utility-scale solar farm can be proposed, permitted, and brought online in as little as 18 months, providing a much faster and more flexible solution to meet surging power demands. The Act ignores this practical reality in favor of ideological purity. The result is a policy that actively makes American energy more expensive and less competitive. The research firm Energy Innovation, using a widely respected and peer-reviewed model, predicts that the move to undermine the U.S. renewable energy industry will cause wholesale electricity prices to rise by approximately 50% by the year 2035. For American consumers and businesses, this translates into a cumulative increase in energy costs of about $16 billion per year by 2030. Instead of achieving energy dominance, the Big and Beautiful Act sets the United States on a path toward higher energy costs, longer development timelines, and a greater reliance on strained global supply chains, ultimately weakening its economic and strategic position. The contrast between the energy trajectories of the United States and China could not be more stark, and the data tells an astonishing story of a great power shift. In the year 2000, China's electricity generation was less than half that of the United States. Today, the roles have been dramatically reversed. China now generates more than double the electricity of the US, which has only managed to increase its output by a mere 13% over the last quarter century. While China's initial growth was fueled by coal, its recent expansion has been overwhelmingly driven by a massive build-out of hydropower, solar, wind, and battery storage. This strategic pivot provides China with a powerful buffer against geopolitical tensions and trade disputes, making its economy increasingly self-reliant and resilient. This massive expansion of clean electricity is not an abstract goal for Beijing. It is a core component of its national strategy. As the Financial Times has noted, China is rapidly becoming the world's first electron economy, where electricity, increasingly from clean sources, powers a growing share of its economic activity. This allows China to decouple from global energy markets dominated by the US dollar and insulates it from the volatility of oil and gas prices. While the Big and Beautiful Act ties America's future more tightly to these volatile commodities, China is building a future powered by technologies it manufactures and controls. This gives Beijing a profound strategic advantage, enhancing its economic independence and geopolitical leverage. The consequences of America's policy choices will be felt for generations. Energy experts are nearly unanimous in their dire assessments. Nick Culver of Atlas Public Policy stated that when we look back on this moment in 10 years, we will find that the United States has essentially failed in its energy transition, willingly retreating from a global race it was once poised to lead. The bill is projected to result in the loss or non-creation of tens of thousands of American renewable energy jobs by 2030. At a time when the world is moving decisively toward a cleaner future, the U.S. is choosing to turn back the clock, a move that will inevitably lead to a decline in its international competitiveness and influence. In the end, there are only two major political parties in the world today that are cheering for the passage of the Big and Beautiful Act: the Republican Party in the United States and the Communist Party of China. For Beijing, this American law is an unbelievable and unexpected gift. Nothing could be more certain to make China great again than a bill that effectively hands the entire future of energy and technology to a willing and waiting rival. By abandoning the clean energy revolution and hobbling its own capacity for innovation, the United States is not just making a poor economic choice, it is making a strategic blunder of historic proportions, one that its chief competitor will exploit to the fullest. The Big and Beautiful Act, celebrated by its proponents as a bold step toward American prosperity, is viewed by a growing chorus of strategists and economists as a monumental strategic own goal. By intentionally crippling its own renewable energy industries, the United States is not merely making a choice about domestic energy sources, it is actively diminishing its competitiveness in the global economy of the 21st century. The legislation effectively puts a brake on the development of solar, wind, and battery storage technologies, the very sectors where future growth, innovation, and job creation are expected to be most explosive. This self-inflicted wound weakens America's economic foundation at the precise moment its chief rival China is doubling down on these same industries, creating a power vacuum that Beijing is eager to fill. The ripple effects of this policy will extend far beyond the energy sector, touching every aspect of American economic and national security. The predicted rise in electricity costs, a direct result of foregoing cheaper renewable alternatives, will act as a hidden tax on every American household and business. For energy-intensive industries, from manufacturing to the burgeoning field of artificial intelligence, higher energy costs will erode profitability and competitiveness, making the United States a less attractive place to invest and operate. This could trigger a slow but steady exodus of capital and innovation to countries with more forward-thinking and cost-effective energy policies, leading to a long-term decline in American industrial capacity and technological leadership. Furthermore, the Act's retreat from clean energy locks the United States into a greater dependence on the volatile global markets for fossil fuels. While the bill aims for energy dominance, true dominance in the modern era requires resilience and insulation from geopolitical shocks. By increasing reliance on oil and natural gas, the U.S. remains susceptible to price swings dictated by international cartels and conflicts in unstable regions. China, in contrast, is systematically reducing its exposure to these same risks by electrifying its economy with domestically produced and controlled renewable energy. This divergence in strategy leaves the U.S. more vulnerable to external pressures, while China builds a more secure and independent economic fortress. This strategic misstep is made all the more baffling by the fact that the United States was, until recently, a leader in the clean energy transition. American innovation and capital were driving forces in making solar and wind power economically viable on a global scale. The Big and Beautiful Act represents a voluntary abdication of this leadership role. It sends a clear signal to the world that America is no longer interested in competing for the future of energy. This retreat creates a void that other nations will rush to exploit, not just in technology and manufacturing, but also in setting the international standards and norms that will govern the global energy landscape for decades to come. For the leadership in Beijing, the passage of the Big and Beautiful Act must feel like an unearned and astonishingly generous dividend. Without having to lift a finger, China finds its primary global competitor voluntarily hobbling its own economic future. Chinese strategists have long identified the clean energy technology sector as a cornerstone of their plan for global economic leadership, encapsulated in initiatives like Made in China 2025. They have poured immense state resources into dominating the entire supply chain, from the mining of rare earth minerals to the manufacturing of solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, and electric vehicles. America's decision to retreat from this battlefield is the strategic equivalent of an army abandoning high ground to its adversary without a single shot being fired. This legislative gift from Washington provides China with a golden opportunity to consolidate its market dominance and accelerate its technological lead. With the United States market becoming less friendly to renewables, Chinese companies can focus their efforts on capturing even larger shares of the rapidly growing markets in Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. This will allow them to achieve even greater economies of scale, driving down costs further and making their products unbeatable on a global scale. The profits and expertise gained from this global expansion will then be reinvested into research and development, widening the innovation gap between China and a stagnating American clean tech sector, ensuring Chinese leadership for a generation. The opportunity for China extends beyond mere economics into the realm of soft power and international diplomacy. As the United States steps back from its commitments to climate action, China can position itself as the world's responsible leader on the most pressing global issue of our time. By championing renewable energy and exporting its clean technologies, Beijing can build alliances and curry favor with nations around the world that are grappling with the effects of climate change. This allows China to weave a narrative of a forward-looking, technologically advanced and collaborative global power, directly contrasting with an America that appears insular, backward-looking, and dismissive of international cooperation. Ultimately, America's self-sabotage allows China to more easily achieve its long-term strategic objectives. A core goal of the Chinese Communist Party is to create a new world order where China, not the United States, sets the rules and standards. Dominance in the foundational technologies of the 21st century, energy, artificial intelligence, and transportation, is the key to realizing this ambition. The Big and Beautiful Act does more than just damage American industries. It actively aids China's grand strategy. It weakens America's economic leverage, diminishes its technological edge, and tarnishes its international reputation, all of which clears the path for China's ascent to the pinnacle of global power. In a world defined by fierce geopolitical competition, it is a rare and telling occasion when a single event is celebrated with equal enthusiasm in the halls of power of two rival nations. The passage of the Big and Beautiful Act creates just such a scenario. The first cheering party is, of course, the Republican Party in the United States, which views the legislation as the fulfillment of its core ideological promises. For them, it represents a triumphant victory for American business, a blow against what they perceive as burdensome environmental regulations, and a return to an economic policy that prioritizes fossil fuels and traditional industries. They celebrate the act as a necessary course correction to make America great again by unleashing its traditional economic engines. The second, and perhaps more fervent cheering party, is the Communist Party of China. From their perspective in Beijing, the act is an unexpected strategic windfall of immense proportions. They see a United States government that is willingly choosing to forfeit the race for the industries of the future. The American decision to defund its renewable energy sector, create barriers to electric vehicle adoption, and make its own electricity more expensive, is a policy that Chinese strategists could only have dreamed of. It perfectly aligns with their own ambitions, as nothing could be more destined to make China great again than an American policy that hands the future of energy, technology, and manufacturing directly to Beijing on a silver platter. This bizarre alignment of interests highlights the profound disconnect between the stated intentions of the Big and Beautiful Act and its likely real-world consequences. While its American proponents believe they are strengthening the nation, they are in fact undermining the very sources of its future power and influence. They are trading long-term strategic advantage for short-term political gains and ideological satisfaction. In doing so, they are playing directly into the hands of their country's main competitor, whose leaders possess a much clearer and more patient understanding of where the world is heading and what it will take to lead it in the decades to come. The irony is thick enough to be a plot from a political thriller. A piece of legislation named the Big and Beautiful Act may ultimately be remembered for making America's primary rival bigger and its own future less beautiful. The applause from these two disparate political parties, one in Washington and one in Beijing, serves as the soundtrack to a pivotal moment in modern history. It is the sound of one global power potentially beginning its decline by choice, and another rising to take its place, not through conquest or coercion, but by gratefully accepting a gift it never expected to receive. In the grand theater of American politics, the Big and Beautiful Act was presented as a masterstroke of economic patriotism, a legislative behemoth designed to unshackle American industry and propel the nation to new heights of prosperity. Signed into law with military pageantry on Independence Day, it was intended to be a symbol of renewed American strength and a fulfillment of the promise to make America great again. However, as the ink dries on this sprawling 940-page document, a starkly different reality begins to emerge. The Act, in its zealous pursuit of a specific ideological vision, is poised to become a textbook example of unintended consequences. It is a policy that, while aiming to fortify America, may instead inflict deep and lasting wounds upon the very foundations of its future economic and strategic power, achieving the precise opposite of its stated goals. The central paradox of this legislation lies in its profound misunderstanding of where future strength will come from. By systematically dismantling support for renewable energy and electric vehicles, the Act champions the industries of the past at the direct expense of the industries of the future. It ignores the undeniable global shift towards a cleaner, more electrified economy, and dismisses the voracious energy demands of the burgeoning artificial intelligence revolution. While the United States chooses to retreat from the clean energy race, its chief competitor, China, continues its relentless march towards domination of this critical sector. The Act therefore is not a strategy for American greatness, but a blueprint for ceding leadership in the most important technological and economic arenas of the 21st century. The consequences will be felt not in the abstract realm of geopolitics, but in the pocketbooks of everyday Americans and the stability of the national economy. The bill's reliance on massive, unfunded tax cuts is projected to add trillions to the national debt, placing an immense burden on future generations. At the same time, by making clean energy more scarce and expensive, it promises to raise electricity prices for consumers and businesses alike, acting as a brake on economic growth. The legislation creates a nation that is less competitive, more indebted, and more vulnerable to the shocks of a rapidly changing world. It is a path that leads not to dominance, but to a slow erosion of the advantages that once made the American economy the envy of the world. Ultimately, the Big and Beautiful Act may be remembered less for its patriotic title and more for its ironic outcome. It is a piece of legislation that could have been designed in Beijing, so perfectly does it align with China's strategic ambitions. It weakens America's innovative capacity, undermines its energy independence, and tarnishes its global leadership. The sound of applause for this bill in Washington is echoed by a louder, more satisfied cheer from the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, who can scarcely believe their luck. They are watching their main rival voluntarily step back from the fields of competition that matter most, clearing the path for their own ascent. The passage of the Big and Beautiful Act marks a definitive fork in the road for the United States. One path, now seemingly abandoned, led toward a future defined by innovation, clean energy leadership, and technological supremacy in fields like artificial intelligence. It was a path that leveraged America's historic strengths in research, development, and free market dynamism to compete and win in the new global economy. The other path, the one chosen by this legislation, leads backward. It is a retreat into the perceived safety of legacy industries, a reliance on the energy sources of the 20th century, and a willful ignorance of the profound technological and environmental shifts that are reshaping our planet. The choice has been made, and the nation must now grapple with the consequences of its new trajectory. If the trends initiated by this act continue unchecked, the future looks sobering for America, and bright for its rivals. The United States risks becoming a laggard in the global energy transition, dependent on volatile fossil fuel markets while other nations power ahead with cheaper, cleaner alternatives. Its technological edge in artificial intelligence and other critical fields could dull as the high energy costs and lack of supportive infrastructure drive innovation elsewhere. The national debt will continue to mount, constraining public investment in education, science, and infrastructure, which are the essential ingredients for long-term prosperity. America could find itself a less dynamic, less influential, and less wealthy nation, having traded its future for a fleeting sense of ideological victory. The great irony is that the nickname once used by Chinese netizens as a joke, Comrade Chuan Jiangguo, implying Trump is unwittingly helping to build China, has been given a veneer of truth by this very legislation. A policy intended to project American strength has become a powerful tool for advancing China's global ambitions. Beijing will continue to exploit this strategic gift, consolidating its control over the supply chains of the future and using its clean energy dominance as a tool of economic and diplomatic influence. The world will watch as one superpower voluntarily steps back, creating a vacuum that the other is more than prepared and willing to fill, reshaping the global balance of power for generations to come. What lies ahead is a critical period of reckoning. Will the American public and its leaders recognize the perilous direction in which the big and beautiful act is taking them? Or will the nation continue down this path, content with short-term gains while forfeiting the grand prize of 21st century leadership? The roar of the F-35s over the White House on that 4th of July celebrated a political victory, but history will judge whether it also marked the beginning of a strategic defeat. The future is not yet written in stone, but the course has been set, and reversing it will require a profound and urgent reawakening to the realities of the new world we inhabit.